of the department, Dr. Maharajas ma'am, Dr. Nandu sir, and our distinguished guest, Dr. Lekha Chakraborty, respected faculty members and dear students. It's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the 98th session of the Econwings lecture series. Today's session is particularly significant as we delve into a topic that directly impacts our economy and daily lives beyond the budget speech, analyzing the fiscal math. As we know, the union budget of this year was presented on February 1st, outlining the government's financial roadmap, priorities, and strategies. But beyond the numbers and announcement lies a deeper fiscal structure that determines how policies are funded, deficit managed, and economic growth sustained. A comprehensive understanding of these intricate fiscal dynamics is crucial for students, policymakers, and economists. To guide us through this complex subject, we are honored to have with us Dr. Lekha Chakraborty, a highly esteemed economist and professor at the National Institute of Public Finance Policy. She is also an elected member of the governing board of the International Institute of Public Finance, a premier global network of public finance economists. Dr. Chakraborty has been a pioneer in institutionalizing gender budgeting in India and has worked extensively with organizations like IMF, World Bank, UNDP, UN Women, and the Commonwealth Secretariat. With experience spanning multiple countries, including Sweden, Canada, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, her insights into macro fiscal policies are invaluable. Beyond her policy contributions, she is an acclaimed academic, having delivered lectures at prestigious institutions such as the London School of Economics, American University, and more importantly, she's an alumna of Government College for Women, making her success a proud moment for all of us. Today's session promises to give us a deeper understanding of the fiscal realities beyond the budget speech, helping us critically analyze government spending, taxation, and fiscal policies. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Chakraborty to this session. I would also like to extend a special welcome to our dedicated head of the department, Dr. Maharajas, who has always been the cornerstone of our department for organizing this enlightening section. I also welcome Nandu sir for this section and also other faculty members who have joined us for this session. Last but not least, I welcome each and every one of you to join the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. So now I invite the head of our department, Dr. Uma ma'am, for a few words.
Respected Professor Lekha Chakraborty and all the distinguished participants, dear students. First of all, hearty welcome to all of you to this 98th session of Econwings webinar series. Of course, with two more, we'll strike 100. And usually we get at least a week to prepare for a session. But this 98th session is a very pleasant short out of a usual conversation with dear Professor Lekha Chakraborty. Professor Lekha, who is, as all of you know, she is respected and loved by all in our department and college. And Dr. Lekha is not an Econwings discovery as far as our department is concerned, because even before the launching of Econwings, we were fortunate to have sessions led by Professor Lekha. And also, no budget season is, complete without her presence, as Anna said, and either online or offline. And all these sessions are marked by very brilliant analysis, deep insights, and thought-provoking inputs. Yesterday, when I informed her about the upcoming budget discussion in our department, wholly managed by our students, Professor Lekha said she would interact with them, and we were sure it would help all the students in understanding the budget. Of course, as the title itself suggests, to go beyond the budget speech for analyzing the fiscal math. And the primary objective of this particular session is to connect us with the right analytical routes to budget, union budget, the 2025-26. As you know, it has a transformative vision, but it has sparked certain debates also. So I'm very happy to host this session. And I apologize for the delay also. Hearty welcome to you, Professor Lekha Chakraborty. And it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Umachechi. So again, homecoming, and congratulations to you and students for making it to 98th session of Econwings. I'm so happy about it because I still remember the baby steps the students have taken to form the Econwings at the department. I'm so happy about it. And I'm equally happy about the upcoming student series about the union budget on 19th and 20th. And, ma'am has already spoken to me that you started preparing. The students have started preparing for the union budget series, and all the best for the preparations, and I hope to join you on 19th and 20th. But there will be a time zone difference because I told her that I will be going to Istanbul for the UN Women meeting on 17th, and 19th is my return flight. So let's see, and I hope to join for your presentations. But before that, as a prelude, I will help you to look at the budget numbers. That's what Professor has told me, that beyond the budget speech, a talk to help the students to gain a budget literacy and to look into the numbers. So this is what Uma ma'am has told me, and I'm so happy to see Professor Nandu today present in the meeting, and welcome to you. And I know your serious works, and Uma ma'am have spoken to me about you, and I'm so happy that you are present among the students. You are there for my session. Now let's
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nandu. So lovely to see you. Thank you so much. And as Uma ma'am has spoken to me, let me open the budget and look at the budget arithmetic. Now that rhetorics and the political economy debates, everything about the budget is over. Now this is the time to get into the hard numbers and how to look into the analysis, analytically look into the numbers. That's what we are going to do now. And every year, Economic and Political Weekly publishes a budget special edition. And last few years, former director of NIPFP, Professor Lekha Chakraborty was the guest editor for that series, and that contains a very enriching set of articles about the union budget. So this time also, we at NIPFP and of course the academic world, we are looking forward to that particular edition of Economic and Political Weekly to get a flair of the serious analytical pieces on budget. And now I think they are commissioning the papers, identifying the right expert to look into the taxation side, expenditure side, deficit, climate, and of course the other concerns about boosting consumer demand. So they are now trying to identify and to commission that serious set of articles. So I urge the students to take a look into that set of articles. It's a brilliant set of articles, and that edition of EPW you can buy from the Modern Book Center, and it's a valuable edition for you it's a keepsake. You can keep that work with you to understand the nuanced public finance articles and the analysis. Now let's begin from the overall framework and the announcement of the budget. It looks like two things finance minister tried to handle. One is beyond the purview of the finance minister, that is the global headwinds. We have seen the Trump is back. Its impact on the wars, the trade tariff wars we have seen. And now the Western world, they are into geopolitical uncertainties and a lot of crisis and uncertainties happening around the world. So that is the setting number one. The second is internally, in the post-pandemic period, of course, base effect is there, but still, India is pitched as the fastest growing country in the world. If you look into the growth rate, of course, the base effect we cannot deny. But suddenly, when the advance estimates came last month, we were disappointed that our growth numbers were not okay. It is around 6.5, but we thought that India will be consistently growing around 7 to 8%, and towards 2047 we have a dream, we have a graduation dream to attain the developed country status, Vikasit Bharat. So this is the internal and external vision, scope and challenge. Against this backdrop, many newspaper journalists, the top journalists, they predicted that it could be a 1991 moment. 1991, you remember, right? In 1991, when Manmohan Singh pitched that opening up of the economy, India didn't have even the forex to finance a few weeks of imports. We were into such a crisis. Then, it's an unforgettable set of reforms, and we are getting the fruits of that, fine policies and the fine reforms that happened in 1991. So the top journalists and academicians thought, is it a moment for that, another 1991 moment, that we will get a very radical, very reformistic budget announcement this year? But when you look into the budget, when you must have heard it very meticulously. Unfortunately or fortunately, it was not a radical budget. It was business as usual budget. But when compared to the earlier years of pitching the focus on the capex to trigger the economic growth recovery, this time, when they looked at the budget numbers and the growth numbers, in the growth numbers, it was mostly capital expenditure led, the capital investment led growth. But the consumption, the private consumption, if you look into, that was plummeting. That is not okay. So how to boost the consumer demand? That was another challenge before the finance minister when she was framing this budget. Then what are the other challenges? She need to do a knife edge equilibrium. On one side, she had her projections about the owned revenue, but take a look into the budget at a glance document and compare the BE estimates, the budget estimates. Those estimates came at the time of the last budget, and after 1 year they put forward the revised estimates. So that revised estimates were lower than what they have projected. So there were fiscal forecasting errors, in the sense what they anticipated as per that much revenue didn't come in. So how to do that knife edge equilibrium of fiscal prudence, fiscal discipline, by maintaining a fiscal deficit to GDP ratio, which was envisioned at 4.5% of GDP in the post-pandemic period. How to do that along with the dream of that growth recovery process. So that was a knife edge equilibrium. Then the market, the animal spirits, investors' confidence, they all need a document which says that the country or India is fiscally disciplined. They want the macroeconomic fundamentals to be strong. So these are challenges, and what are the rabbits in her hat? So she's not a magician, but we were anticipating what are those rabbits coming out of this hat in the budget. But this budget, there were no major surprises other than an announcement related to income tax relief for the citizens who are earning up to 12 lakhs. So that was the headline news that came up in this budget. Now, let's look into the budget numbers. First, let's get into the deficit, which is the resource gap. Then we will analyze the taxation side and the expenditure side in detail. Now, if you can open the budget at a glance document, that's there in the website of the Ministry of Finance. So you can just Google that budget at a glance document. You can open it and see the deficit numbers first. So let's take a look into the deficit numbers. So if you're unable to open, I will read it out for you and help you to analyze it. There are different concepts of deficit here. The prime motive of the government was not to deviate from the fiscal consolidation path. So the fiscal consolidation part is envisioning your fiscal deficit, that is the net borrowing requirement of the government, to be fixed at 4.5%. But when the budget announcement came, she announced that she is pegging the fiscal deficit, that is a net borrowing requirement, at 4.4%. So this is the first number we look forward to. So that is 4.4%. And there was rally in the stock market. Everybody is happy. Investors' confidence didn't suffer, because that signaling to the investors that the government is on the path of fiscal consolidation. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Fiscal consolidation is good if you are, controlling your deficit through revenue buoyancy. But if you control your spending, if you curtail your spending, that will affect the quality of fiscal deficit. So that's the case. So we need to look into her numbers, her arithmetic, how she has attained that number 4.4%. And take a look into last year for a perspective, for a comparative perspective. Last year, she pegged her fiscal deficit at 4.9 in the budget estimates when she announced that last budget. But after, not even 1 year, it was like last time. Then if you look into that revised estimates, it is 4.8. So it is better now. But these are good numbers. But beyond the number, we need to understand the story. Now take a look into the revenue deficit. Yesterday, I was participating in the day before, participating in the CNBC, the budget 2025, the verdict that was led by Shireen Ban. She's a very, efficient, very popular journalist, and students can take a look into her programs in CNBC. It is like almost 2 decades now, or 25 years now, the CNBC, looking into the business related, news. And Lata Venkatesh, Shireen Ban, they all have very high quality, programs related to the business, economic and the business or the financial economics. So Shireen Ban asked a question like to Ajay Seth, what is it, your vision is to keep the capex going, and that capex is very important for the growth recovery process. But now it looks like you are hitting the, you're running the last mile, because beyond this, given the fiscal space, you will not be able to enhance the capex spending. At the same time, the public investment or the capex should attract private investment. That was a very purpose of government focusing on increasing the capex. Though the deficit was very high, we were increasing the capex thinking that the private investment will pitch in, will crowd in. But the private investors are shy. So how long government can do the heavy lifting related to the public infrastructure? Our fiscal space is reaching a point in which now private sector has to play the role. But why the private sector is shy? Is it because the demand is not picking up? Because if they are uncertain about the demand, then the industrial capacity utilization will not be at the fullest potential. It will be below. Is it that the demand issue that is bothering them despite government being so much spending on the capex? Then what is the process to trigger the demand or to stabilize the aggregate demand? So these were the new questions came up in front of government. And also he mentioned that whatever he is borrowing, it's getting into the capex only. So it's for the predictive purpose he is using the borrowings. So to understand that statement, what students have to do is that in the budget of glance, there is a term called revenue deficit. If the revenue deficit is 0, then that statement is correct. Whatever government is borrowing, that is entirely going for the capex spending. But when you look into the numbers of revenue deficit, of course, it was as high as 2.6 in 23-24 when you look into the actual numbers. But it came down to 1.8 in the budget estimates of 24-25. But in the revised estimates, if you look into Of course, the fiscal deficit, the number has come down from 4.9 to 4.8, but revenue deficit has gone up from 1.8 to 1.9. But she pegged her revenue deficit this year to 1.5. So she didn't phase out the revenue deficit. Means what? Little bit of borrowings will get into financing the revenue expenditure as well. Revenue deficit zero means your revenue receipts and revenue expenditure, these need to be equal, and the entire revenue spending will be done from the revenue receipts you earn from the economy. But if that is not the case, little bit of borrowing will get into financing of the revenue expenditure. So that is the case, but that is exactly why your revenue deficit is not zero. If that is zero, in the fiscal rules we call this as golden rule. Golden rule means the revenue deficit is zero. Why it is golden fiscal rule? As Ajay said, it is going to be entirely, the borrowings will entirely finance the capex spending, which is productive in nature. That's why it's a golden rule in the fiscal rules. But if you look at the FRBM, the fiscal responsibility and the budget management, because that is the the fiscal rule of our country, and that FRBM document you can take a look into, and it was like twice. It was done first around 2004, then we revised it in 2018, and 2018 the chairperson of that fiscal responsibility and budget management, that committee, was N.K. Singh. He was the chairman of the previous finance commission, and N.K. Singh, then the members included Arvind Subramaniam, who was the chief economic advisor, then Ratin Roy, who was the NIPFP director. So, they looked into the plausibilities of the fiscal rules of our country, and that time in 2018, take a look into the finance bill which is placed in the parliament along with the budget documents. The clauses related to the revenue deficit was taken out. So that clause of revenue deficit to be zero was taken out in 2018. So now if you look into the revenue deficit, it is as high as, I said that it is not zero, it is as high as 1.5. Now, there is another concept of deficit, that is primary deficit. What is primary deficit? Your deficit contains past liabilities, that is the interest payments, and also you create a deficit because your revenue is less than the expenditure you envisioned, so you need to borrow. So how to demarcate these two? How to look into the current fiscal policy stance? So if you want to look into the current fiscal policy stance, you need to deduct your interest payment from the entire fiscal deficit. So when you do that in India, in the primary deficit, if you look into the numbers, take a look into the numbers in that budget at a glance in page number 3, then you know that this revenue primary deficit is 0.8 this year. And earlier, if you look at the actuals in 2023-24, it was 2%. Then it came down to 1.4 in 24-25 budget estimates. And the revised estimates show that the revenue deficit is further down, that is 1.3. And this year, she pegged it only to 0.8. Okay, now the question is, I mentioned about the FRBM. There was a discussion within the committee members and the chairperson about what could be the operational parameter of a fiscal policy, like whether it is fiscal deficit to measure the resource gap, or whether it should be primary deficit, or whether we should believe in golden principle, that is revenue deficit to be zero. So in that debate, Arvind Subramaniam, he took a stance that country should look into primary deficit because that is the current fiscal policy stance, and the rate of interest is exogenous to the finance minister or finance ministry, and the rate of interest affects your past liabilities, because if the rate of interest is high, your debt servicing will go higher, the public debt management will go higher. That's exactly why we look forward to this MPC meeting that's going to they're going to announce very soon the new repo rate. So we are anticipating this time this new RBI governor who was in the Ministry of Finance. We met him. His name is Rajiv Malhotra. He's Malhotra. So he was in North Block. Now he's a RBI governor. So we anticipate that he might decrease the rate of interest of the repo rate by at least 25 basis points. We are anticipating that there will be a reduction given that inflation is easing a bit and public debt management is very costly now. In the low interest rate regime, high deficit and high debt is okay because the debt servicing will not be that costly. But now with the mounting interest rate, the debt management is going costly and the growth recovery process is getting slower because we are unable to do investment at a low interest rate, and investors always want a low interest rate. So we are anticipating that there might be a cut. They will not go hawkish. There might be a cut in the interest rates. Now what happened is that I mentioned about the tug of war between the primary deficit and the fiscal deficit. And Arvind Subramaniam, many economists believe that take out the past liabilities, focus on your current fiscal policy stance, and measure the resource gap, and you manage your primary deficit. Now, the hidden debt created a lot of problem. So hidden debt is not at all coming within the purview of fiscal deficit, primary deficit, or revenue deficit. Globally, if you look into the hidden debt, that is the debt which is created by the country or the state beyond the net borrowing requirement, which is transparent in the fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit is about the resource gap by the general government, but not through the public sector entities or through the corporate bodies. And the government, many governments across world, they started innovating the special vehicles to do their expenditure management when they had a fiscal rule of maintaining the threshold ratio, fiscal deficit to GDP at 3%. So our state also has done. And Geeta Gopinath, she has that IMF blog. She has many 1-minute videos, and this is an era of just 1 minute. We call it as shorts or reels. And take a look into the reels in which she explained the contemporary international macro. So there she articulated that it is $1 trillion in the economy, this hidden debt, and many countries are suffering from hidden debt because it is a combination of high debt and low growth. This is what exactly is a problem which in the post-pandemic fiscal strategy, this is the fiscal risk which countries are tackling right now. So this hidden debt, that is OBB, like off budget. It is taken off budget, and the last B is borrowing. The borrowing, that is off budget borrowing, or it is also called off budget liability. That is mounting. So will we get into a new concept other than revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, primary deficit, another concept called PSBR, that is public sector borrowing requirement? And take a look into the primer by RBI. The title of that primer is Primer on Deficits, and in that work by RBI, they have explained all these terms in a very nuanced manner with the help of the empirical evidence by plotting the data, the graph, both high frequency and annual. That will be a good work which can be referred by the students to understand these basic concepts of the resource gap in detail and with clarity. So there, they have produced, RBI has worked on this public sector requirement, borrowing requirement for a few years, but the time series is not available, and we don't have a time series data on PSBR or public sector borrowing requirement. Now we have the hidden debt, but it will be which was outside the purview of fiscal deficit, which will be incorporated into the deficit concept, and the budget transparency will be given importance. Now, again, let's take a look into the numbers. Fiscal deficit, which peaked to 9% of GDP in the post-pandemic period, it was brought down to now 4.4%. And it is tied mostly to the capex formation in the economy. Okay, so far the story is good. But if you look into the numbers in detail, whether there is a stimulus, whether the fiscal policy will support consumption, whether it will trigger economic growth. When you ask these questions to yourself, one thing you cannot miss, that is the size of government. Whatever trigger or whatever boosting of consumption the finance minister announced, it will have limited effect if the total size of the government itself is coming down over the years. That means you are not spending, your fiscal space is getting shrunk. So take a look into the numbers, whether the fiscal deficit, the size of the government has shrunk. And unfortunately, if you look into the numbers intertemporally, you can understand that the total expenditure to GDP ratio, that is what is called the size of government, that is measuring the government spending, that came down, that reduced. And if you look into the numbers, it was around 16%, the size of the government, that is total expenditure to GDP ratio in FY 2022. And if you look into FY 24, that 16 became 15%. That expenditure, total expenditure to GDP. So the total fiscal space, or the total expenditure you design for your country, that's coming down. And if you take a look into FY 26 budget estimate, expenditure as a percentage of GDP, that is 14%. So what exactly are we talking about? That the budget will stimulate the economy because the overall size of the government is coming down. You can understand, this is bound to happen because we have foregone a lot of revenue also by announcing the tax exemption limits and all. So this is a reality, and this is a matter of worry, that the size of the government is coming down over the years. Now it's around 14% when compared to earlier 17%, 16%. So when the general government to that GDP, when that gets shrunk, then the stimulus or the potential of the budget to trigger the economy will also be limited. So we need to look into these numbers in detail. And what about the tax GDP ratio? And there is a beautiful graph about the tax GDP ratio in that budget at a glance. I have seen that, graph that is in page number 5, I think. So they have given, that tax GDP ratio, direct and indirect, also disaggregated. So the tax GDP ratio is also shrinking. So then if you look into the tax GDP ratio of, the direct and the indirect taxes, that indirect taxes is contributing very significantly. It is not exactly the direct taxes that is a major component of the overall tax structure in India. What does it mean? It means that the poor people do pay tax, and the overall tax system, whether it is regressive, because if there is, considerable, significant component of indirect taxes we collect in a country, then it is little regressive because poor people pay indirect taxes. So that statement, in India, rich people, upper middle class pay taxes and we cross subsidize poor people, that is a wrong statement because indirect tax component is very high in the context of India. So that statement is wrong. So to stimulate the consumption, we focused not on the broad-based population of India, but when you look into the numbers, the growth numbers, the urban consumption was getting affected. So how to boost the urban demand? So maybe that is what has given that, the rationale for the finance minister to go for up to 12 lakhs rupees to go for a tax rebate. And but again, if it is more than 12 lakhs, if your parents are into the earning like around 12 lakh 1,000 or something marginally extra than that, do they naturally get into the next slab and they have to pay lot of taxes from that nil taxes just because of a marginal hike? That is a question asked, but government has come up with that marginal adjustment as well. So you don't have to worry, that marginal is there. But what is worrying me is the percentage of Indian population who are taxpayers. Because if you look into the structure of Indian economy, informal sector is very huge in India. The formal sector is, very insignificant, maybe 4%. And within that 4%, maybe 2.5% of the taxpayers of the Indian population got benefits when she declared that we will go no tax for income which is earned up to 12 lakhs. Now, this is post-pandemic period. Income is also coming down. So this is a huge relief for the people who are earning income, which is again plummeting in the post-pandemic period. It's a huge relief. As a relief, it is welcome. But it will trigger the Indian economy. It will do that Keynesian multiplier by boosting the economic growth. These are all empirical questions. We need to test it and see. We cannot do that lazy link between tax exemptions in the direct taxes and boosting the demand. That will be a very lazy statement. We need to look into the potential given the minuscule population of Indian population are paying the taxes, and also the concern raised by Rikuram Rajan that if the propensity to save is greater than propensity to consume, then we had it. We cannot, lead the economy to the growth recovery process through the consumption path. So, in the growth recovery process, the fiscal consolidation path, given the fiscal consolidation path, now the strategy which was entirely focused on the capex in this budget got revised into capex and boosting consumption. And capex, the transfers to the states are also equally welcome. Like 1 lakh crore is given to the states for doing the capex. But of course, the state capacity differs. And if you look into the numbers, we call it as fiscal marksmanship. Look into the fiscal forecasting errors of the capital budget, the capital expenditure we anticipated, we aspired for, and in the revised estimates, how much is spent. If you look into that number, in this budget at a glance, that first table will give you that difference. Then there is a difference that we couldn't spend the entire capex we envisioned, but still it is very high in this year also, and we need to know whether we will be able to do heavy lifting. And Expenditure Secretary Somnath, we have heard his statement that government is hitting the last mile regarding the capex, because given the fiscal space and given that there is, first we thought that there will be a lag effect and private investment will pitch in, but now that the private investment is not coming in and the government is also reaching ultimate point in which we can do the capex given the fiscal space and given the overall shrinking of the total expenditure, now I think it won't be plausible for us to do more. And if the industrial people and the investors' confidence is given importance, then we will get into the fiscal austerity measures, which is further affecting the growth recovery process. So it is kind of a knife's edge equilibrium, and there is a crisis. And we are confident because we cannot show that the crisis is mounting because the investors' confidence will suffer. No, so that confidence is shown by the finance minister in two ways. One is she focused on her fiscal consolidation path. She did that knife edge equilibrium, and also she gave some relief to the taxpayers. But the question is salary, wages, that is getting stagnant in India in the post-pandemic period. And now the 8th pay commission at the opportune time they constituted. Earlier, the government was little hesitant to constitute another pay commission, but now they realize the importance of increasing the wages and salaries and pensions to boost the consumption, but of course, even if they save, then it is also, through that channel it will be invested. But increase the salaries and wages, it's very important component for the growth recovery process at the center level or the state level, because if you curtail or if you stagger the salaries and pensions to look to make your fiscal arithmetic look beautiful, that is the optics of it, but the growth recovery process will get suffered. So you remember in 2007 moment, the global financial crisis moment, then monetary policy tool was very important to tackle the growth recovery process because the world was into a Minsky moment. Then the fiscal policy was not given that importance. In India, we survived the global financial crisis to a great extent because the supplementary demand for grants that time handled the entitlement based employment guarantee schemes. So that created a lot of demand and it sustained the economy, and the pay commission came at the right time. So the income in the hands of the people went high. So that these two helped India to survive the global financial crisis. So the lessons learned from that is focus on your employment and focus on increasing the wages and salaries, because any staggering of salary or related allowances or pensions at staggering will further affect your growth. We cannot do anything about that by curtailing salaries and fiscal austerity. So these are important lessons we learned through the histories. So that is the taxation story, and we lost around 1 lakh crore by announcing this. So that is getting reflected in the size of the budget. Our anticipated public expenditure also came down, because how we will maintain that loss, the finance minister was asked. So she has to borrow, otherwise she need to curtail her spending. There is a way in which we need to handle that further loss of income. Now, fiscal marksmanship I mentioned, you look into the other numbers. Taxes, where it is coming from. If you look into the revenue receipts, again that is another table in your budget at a glance, that we are getting around 17 or 22% of the entire revenue from the income taxes, 17% from corporate tax. So these two are direct taxes. Then we also get our revenue from indirect taxes like customs, around 4%. We get from the GST around 18%, from the union excise duties around 9%. So in addition to this own tax revenue from the direct and indirect tax sources, we also get little bit of revenue from non-tax receipts around 9. Then we have the borrowing and non-debt capital receipts. What is non-debt capital receipts? That is the disinvestment proceeds and the dividends we get from RBI. One moment, I'll drink little water. Excuse me. Yeah. So the total money, where is it coming from to India? If you look into, you get a lot of revenue from the direct taxes like income tax around 22%, consumption tax, corporate tax around 17%. So there is a debate related to this corporate tax. It was a tax terrorism if you keep your corporate tax very high in a country. In the sense, you have to attract the mobile capital. The capital is mobile. So people enter into tax war by competing to reduce the corporate tax to attract the mobile capital. So that is a kind of a tax war. So in India, in many countries, there was OECD negotiations. We have global, in the international taxation principles, we have pillar 1, pillar 2. Pillar 2 is like global minimum tax for the corporate taxes, that need to be brought down to 15%. And we have done that. That was a major revision related to tax reform related to corporate taxes. But in India, after 1960s, we always thought that direct tax code reforms will happen anytime. But over these decades, the direct tax code reforms didn't happen. And that's a good news in this budget, that they will produce that new tax bill, that was not placed in the parliament along with the budget, but the direct taxes will be looked into. And those details, we need to take a look into that document when it is placed, the new tax bill. That is a very good news, because I do remember in an NIPFP, we always look forward to this budget announcement, and we always think, no, there was no announcements related to direct tax code, DTC. So that was the one thing. And second, women always thought that, okay, some exemptions we will get. And in some budgets, there is a section called 88C in the income tax, like some exemption limit, maybe 50,000 more rupees. So like that, women will be exempted from, the income tax or the higher exemption limit for women. But these are not exactly the announcement. These are all temporary relief. So we always look forward to the DTC, the direct tax code reforms, and that is a good news that it will be anytime we can. And, I heard from the CNBC meeting that now the CAs and the tax experts will lose their job because, finance minister gave a clue that the document will be how, because direct tax code, that book is there in NIPFP library. It's a huge book, and that requires some kind of a tax expertise to understand the way it is written legally and all. So finance minister mentioned that it will be half the size, the words will be less, that legal things, that clarity will be more. So the tax experts are fearing that now citizens will understand their tax liabilities much more in an easier manner. So that's a good news. Let's wait and see the direct tax reforms that's going to happen, not for the corporate but for the income tax, personal income tax. And even Surjit Palla or somebody has created a huge this thing right kind of a noise that India should not take any income tax. That kind of announcement also came, but there should not be an income tax. But we will not consider no income tax country. But we will be looking and revising the the tax, direct taxes and indirect taxes. Of course, it is outside the purview of the budget, because it is GST Council will be handling that more. That's about the indirect taxes. And indirect taxes, one important component is the taxes you collect from sin goods. So that is now becoming a huge specialized analysis which is happening in an IPFP. Look into the tax which we get from the sin goods. And sin goods, how do you define? So these are the new kind of analysis and the debates, and whether carbon tax, sugar tax should be included into sin tax. Then of course the excise, of course the tobacco related taxes like cigarettes. So there are a lot of commodities which are sin goods. So those kind of reforms are another important part of the tax reforms. So that is also another major component. Now, along with the taxes and non-taxes, we have non-debt capital receipts. Like I mentioned, disinvestment, like public sector enterprises. We want to disinvest so that we will get some money. But Tuhin Pante, who was the disinvestment, DIPAM secretary, the Department of, the public investment. So DIPAM, he became the revenue secretary right now. So he was in that disinvestment ministry. So always he projected a number which is very huge. He dreamed that his fiscal proceeds will be very huge. But when you look into the revised estimates, the fiscal marksmanship suffered the most related to the disinvestment proceeds. And last year also, you may be remembering that 50,000 crores we anticipated, and it was 33. So this year they were realistic and gave a number. I will just check if it is open before you. You can also check. They gave a non-debt creating receipts number which is very very mild. 47,000 they are anticipating this time. Last time they anticipated 50,000 crores, but in revised estimates it was only 33,000. This year they are visualizing 47, but you can always keep your fingers crossed, and maybe a good number will be 30 next year, because we don't know. It's more than the fiscal proceeds when we think about the disinvestment process. And that is not a great source of income. And then dividends from RBI will be a windfall, but that is not a continuous thing, but it is like a sporadic, ways in which we can increase our fiscal space. So on one side, the tax story, I mentioned that we are into the tax reforms, and the non-debt, capital receipts, that's fiscal marksmanship is not that great. So we have to borrow. So we need to estimate how much should we borrow this year. And they have given a number which is comparatively less than the last year's number, less in the sense mildly. like 1569527 crores last year. This year it is 15689. So it's a mild decline. So we need to wait and see. And how do we finance the deficit in India? Mostly we finance the deficit through market borrowings. It is not like printing money from the RBI and you're financing the deficit, or it is not like you go to the external markets or World Bank or IMF with huge conditionalities. You take loan like other countries where there is a huge donor presence and you finance your deficit. No, in India you finance your deficit through the internal market borrowings. That is very high. So that's a way. The level of the deficit is 4.4% of GDP, and the predominant form of financing the deficit is through the market borrowing. You preempt the loanable funds from the market to finance your deficit. So that's the way it is. So when I recap, it's about how the deficit numbers we discussed. We discussed about the detail about the revenue receipts. We mentioned that our total expenditure to GDP, the size of the government is coming down. And when you disaggregate that number, the expenditure budget, the interest payments, that is very huge, around 20%. Then defense this year, nobody has spoken about that in detail, about the defense. Defense secretary was there in the CNBC meeting, and defense spending is relatively higher this year. And given the geopolitical uncertainties and all, and CIPRI data, the Stockholm, there is a source of data to know the military spending across countries. So if students want to know the link between the defense expenditure and economic growth, if you want to do an analysis, an econometric analysis across countries, you take a look into the CIPRI data, CIPRI, Stockholm International Research on I'm forgetting, CIPRI. So that data will give you the details of the military spending or the defense spending. And I have done a study with Swati and Hanush, host of Augsburg University, Germany, looking into the CIPRI data, the cross-country analysis. And defense and economic growth, of course, there is a link. But we got in that analysis that the link between innovation-related spending and R&D was relatively higher than the defense-related growth links. So if you ask me, in this budget, the defense is up. So will it help in economic growth recovery? Of course, we are not expecting any peace dividend this moment, because the war, in the geopolitical uncertainty is always there. So it is inevitable that the defense spending will go up. And in the CIPRI data, in that international data, so far, what we have seen is that, next to UAE, India was one of the biggest importers of the arms and ammunition and all. But now, Defense Secretary mentioned that there are a lot of procurements and a lot of new cases and new deals are struck. And we will get into a prime exporter than an importer or something like that. That statement, it was well taken, but we need to analyze using the numbers. These were the statements I got from the meeting in Lutyens, Delhi. So defense, that sector is also now important. So interest payment, the debt servicing is also on high. And if you look into the revenue deficit, subsidies around 16%, pensions around 4%, there are a lot of spending which are committed in nature. We cannot do anything about it, because if you change that, then we are getting into fiscal austerity mode. So we need to manage the revenue expenditure and the capex, on the expenditure side. So it is a knife edge equilibrium. It is a tightrope walk done by the finance minister. And if you look into the bloodbath, the cut in the spending for or the flagship programs or the centrally sponsored schemes, that has happened because our fiscal space is limited. And the entire story in one line, if you want to see, that is the size of the government is coming down. So that's a story about. Now we look forward to the announcement about the interest rates by the RBI to understand, because the fiscal policy, we remained very accommodative for the growth recovery process, but now we are hitting that last mile, that fiscal space, we are unable to do more about it. So now the ball is in the court of RBI, that they decrease the interest rate, but it is not one to one. If you decrease the interest rate, then the growth recovery process will be like one to one, like a magic bullet. No, interest rate is not a magic bullet for growth recovery process, but it can ease the tension, because the fiscal policy, we can't be more accommodative, and that is important. Now, my last point is about the structural reforms, because so far we thought that the fiscal policy and the monetary policy, they can pitch as a counter-cyclical policy tool. By using the interest rate, the monetary policy can trigger the economy. By using the deficits and the accommodative fiscal stance, we can trigger. But it is not about the cyclicality. In the post-pandemic period, the growth suffered. Whatever we have experienced in that growth plummeting down, that is not cyclical. That fiscal and monetary policy stimulus will automatically give you a U-turn, a cyclicality upwards. No, that's not happening. It is structurally down. So when you have permanent scar, in the literature you call it as permanent scars, you can take a look into the works by Valeria Serra, Cerra. She has looked into using the random walk and all. She examined this growth process, and dating of business cycle is not plausible. Geeta Gopinath also mentioned in her work Cycle is Trend. It's not a very recent work, but that point flagged by these researchers are the business cycles in the context of emerging countries are very weak. So when you cannot date ups and downs in the business cycles, fiscal and monetary policy, if they are focusing only on the cyclicality elements, then you won't get the growth recovery process correct. So you need to look into the structural reforms, and the structural reforms related to the power. Our power story is in mess. You know that we have promises towards zero net carbon emissions. Power is an important sector. So what they have done in the state government level, when they declare the fiscal rule, like 3% of the fiscal deficit to GDP, the states need to maintain. That's a fiscal rule they announced. They announced little bit more, like 3.5. That 0.5% of the deficit for the states, they can avail that extra borrowing space if they get into power sector reforms. Like, they have to correct their financial efficiency parameters. They have to correct the operational efficiency mostly with the power infrastructure. They have to do that towards the transition or towards non-conventional or away from fossil fuel based. And in this budget, there was huge importance to that nuclear. Some economists, they call it as it is not for the destructive purpose. It is, I don't know to say that nuclear, the term they used, but it is good that if you are able to use it for the productive purposes, a non-destructive manner, that focus on nuclear, that is one of the important element now. So this energy transition is given importance in the budget. That is a structural reform. The power sector, that is a structural reform. And that needs to be given emphasis along with that cyclicality to get in the economy, because I always mention to my students that this fiscal transition we are speaking, it is incomplete if you don't speak about energy transition, because there is a co-movement between the fiscal transition and the energy transition and the climate change commitments. And we have to see what 16th Finance Commission also need to speak about the climate change commitments and the fiscal space of the subnational governments. We have to wait and see, because now there was a preferential statement. The political economy of the budget is very strong because it's not a majoritarian government. It's like what I meant is that it's a coalition government. So that pressures from the coalition government to go for preferential treatment for that state which support the government, that was very clear, and it was demoralizing. So those issues were, huge debates happened in the parliament, the political economy of the budget, because if minister, can't appease the coalition of the government falls, what will happen? So there are a lot of political economy pressures, and that was very demoralizing for the states which are efficient. And you also heard a statement by irresponsible statement by one of the ministers that government support only equity, only poor states. So if you're poor, you declare you're poor. No, efficiency should not get penalized. So it was very interesting to go through those political economy debates of this budget as well. So in one statement, it was a very tough way in which we handled, the fiscal consolidation, and whether growth recovery process is given importance. If you ask me, I think fiscal policy is hitting the extreme level, and now we are anticipating that the RBI or the central bank is going to do that job of growth recovery process through repo rate mechanisms. So that's all about that policy coordination that is very nice in India, fiscal and monetary policy coordination, and along with that the other macroeconomic reforms like protectionism and the trade wars, how we are going to tackle that is another important element which is now becoming what do you call an element which you need to tackle. So there are uncertainties. So how to navigate these uncertainties? And please read that article by former director of NIPFP, Professor Pinaki Chakraborty in Indian Express on February 2nd or February 3rd. That's a beautiful article that how we try to navigate through this uncertainty. It's a very analytical piece. So students can take a look into that when you prepare your presentations on 19th and 20th. That's a very beautiful article. Then another article by Dr. Ratin Roy in Economic Times. Then, of course, you must listen to the debate in the CNBC by N.K. Singh, who was the FRBM chairperson. He had given a few beautiful, points. I have discussed already when I have spoken to you about this budget elements, but you hear from him directly. Then Sajid has written another article, like he also raised his concerns about the growth recovery process, the way I mentioned to you that capex is like stagnating, but boosting the consumption, it was only marginal. It was urban and it was only for the minuscule population we tried. So given all these uncertainties, it's like miles to go, and we have not done any inflationary announcements to overheat the economy, but inequality and poverty, lot of work to be done. And given this fiscal space, my statement is like fiscal arithmetic looked very okay, but what was there for tackling the poverty and inequality, we need to do more. And C. Rankarajan, when he presented a presentation in an IPFP for the civil service probationers, I was like, directing the scores, and he mentioned a aspirational statement like, if India at least grow with 6.5 growth rate, real growth rate for over next 2 decades, then we might reach to the developed country status. So these are all very important, and fiscal numbers are one thing, governance deficit is at another. So that is another thing to be tackled. Institutions, which, they got the Nobel Prize this year. Institutions, governance deficit. These are also equally important for fulfilling our aspiration to go to the next level, incorporating climate and gender inequalities concerns by getting into climate bonds, gender bonds to finance, these human development related aspirations, and to maintain the human capital formation. And thank you so much, and I stop here. I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Uma ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really a valuable discussion. That brings us to the end of this insightful session on Budget Analysis 2025. A big thank you to esteemed speaker, Dr. Lekha ma'am, for sharing her valuable insights. So now, if you have any queries or questions regarding the session, please, all of you, please feel free to talk.
Lekha ma'am,
Yes.
Nandu.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure that students will have a lot of questions in their minds to ask. So I will be brief as much as possible. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving such an elaborate presentation on the budget and especially the explanations on the concepts on deficit and all. That will be very useful for students on their academic also. And more than that, as you rightly mentioned, after the budget, the main heading in every news channels was the rise in the income tax slab. But as you rightly pointed out, whether it solved the current problem faced by India, we can say that it cannot completely solve the current crisis because, in my opinion, this rise in income tax slab actually it is a policy that is long overdue because for the last 10 years there was not any significant rise in this income tax slab. So I think it is a justice to the salaried group or the middle class group that is delivered late. So I also welcome that move of the government. But as you like you mentioned regarding the demand aspect, actually the income tax, the rise in income tax slab, actually I consider it as a supply side measure because based on the supply side economics, so it reduces the tax wedge. And it will help not only the government sector, but the private sector also. So those coming under the organized sector. So the companies will be, it will help the companies to maintain the wage status quo. So I consider it as a supply side measure. But when you want to increase the demand side, especially if you want to work out the Keynesian multiplier, then the income must reach the hands of the lower income section. And in the current budget, we do not hear much about any incentive to the farmers or the agricultural sector. Because in India, majority of people are still working in the agriculture sector, and another huge sector is the unorganized sector. And you rightly pointed out that after the COVID pandemic, the income in the unorganized sector is stagnant and it is very low, or it is only sustenance wage they are getting. So without any policies to boost their income, at least the income of the farmers, because in earlier budgets they declared that the farmers' income will be doubled or like promises were given before the election. So we didn't see any such measures to boost income of farmers because once the demand in the agriculture sector increase, that will help the demand in help in creating demand for manufactured goods as well. So these kind of direct measures to enhance demand is not much seen in this budget. So on that aspect, I think there is a lack in the action from the government, lack of action. So that portion need to be increased, and there is so much other issues like the inequality and all poverty that definitely the government must address. Otherwise, as the Marxian economists, even the world economy, it is very significant. The inequality is not only in India, in all over the world, inequality is rising, and very few people are benefiting from the developments of capitalism. So the world itself is going to a realization crisis, and it may end in a stagnation or another crisis. And one more thing, you mentioned about the new RBI governor. There is a chance for reducing interest. Definitely, that will help in creating demand in the construction sector and all. And given the low prospects for in inflation in the current scenario, it will be a welcome move. But that also will only create a bubble. I think the capitalist economy survives through bubbles. So by reducing interest rate, you can create bubble. But if you want actual development, the income should. I think the government must give more importance to the unorganized sector workers and the agricultural laborers. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for telling me all these points, very well taken. Thank you so much.
And ma'am, if you can give little more elaboration on the direct tax code also, then it will be useful.
Yeah,
Okay.
we will do that another session, because we have to study that the new tax that document in detail, and we will do it later. Right now, all what I understood from the budget speech is that she will she postponed her announcements towards the next week. That's what she told. But simplification is that word she used again and again. So let's wait for that document. We will study that in detail, and we will do a session, promise. Yeah. And there are different elements to look into, Nandu. You know that, like a TDS, TCS, the slab. So I remember when you asked, I remember that this TDS, that threshold amount is increased for the senior citizens for the interest income from 50 to. So these kind of little announcements we got from the budget speech. But let's study that thing when it gets published, and when it gets become public in detail, and we will do a detailed session on DTC later. But all I remember is that announcements related to the marginal and the DTC, I mean the TDS and the TCS and the slabs revision. Yeah, we will do that later. I'll save that question for future, Nandu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, ma'am. We like to hear your words and your analysis.
Yeah, we will do
that's
DTC later. Yes, we'll do that.
Okay. I think today's session, students got a lot of information. I think maybe because of that, they are not asking any questions.
Okay, so we are calling it a day. Okay, so no questions, students. So wish you all the best for your presentations. Maybe I will try to join you on 19th and 20th. Then after listening to your presentations, then we can have a chat on 19th and 20th. If that is okay, Abhya?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, ask me.
Ma'am,
Uma ma'am, yeah.
I just want to thank you.
Yeah.
Because you have given the essential drive to all of us to go beyond the budget speech, and you have clearly made us feel concerned about the shrinking fiscal space, and we need to find out, as you rightly said, we need to find out whether the structural weaknesses that persist would limit our long-term economic resilience. And as we know, we have deepening structural imbalances and also the governance deficit. These are very crucial issues, and I'm sure students should feel motivated, should feel inspired to explore more. And amidst your very hectic schedule, you spared your valuable time to do this session for all of us. And I know you have come here to Trivandrum to participate in the Mathrubhumi International Festival of Letters. And for your information, Dr. Lekha Chakraborty would be speaking on the economy beyond numbers, and that will be on 7th February, isn't it?
Yeah,
that
2 o'clock, yes.
February, 2 o'clock. So all the best wishes to you. We all are proud of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mama. It's very, it's an inspiration for me when you speak. Thank you so much, and thank you also for capturing the core points of my talk in that 3 points, like shrinking fiscal space, the structural weakness, and the importance of India to get into the structural reforms and the governance deficit. So I felt so happy that these 3 points that cut across your mind, and this is exactly what is bothering me as well regarding the Indian economy. And we hope for students to give importance to these factors in their presentations as well. Thank you so much.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also I must appreciate the faculty coordinator, dear Nandu, and also team Third BA Economics for making this session happen. Thank you all.
Thank
Do
you.
we have formal vote of thanks, Abhaya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay then.
Thank you, Nandu.
So-
Yeah.
Okay. We are so grateful to you, ma'am. So now I invite Devika for vote of thanks.
ഹലോ ബജറ്റിനെ കുറിച്ച് നമുക്ക് ഇത്രയധികം കാര്യങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞു തന്നതിനും ടോപ്പിക് വൈസ് ആയിട്ട് ഹലോ കേൾക്കാവോ ടോപ്പിക് വൈസ് തിരിച്ചിട്ട് മാം ആണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും വിശദമായിട്ട് തന്നെ ബജറ്റിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞു തന്നു. റെഫറൻസ് എവിടെയൊക്കെ ചെയ്യാമെന്നും കൃത്യമായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു തന്നു. ഞാൻ എല്ലാം ലേഖ ചക്രവർത്തി മാമിന് എന്റെ പേരിലും ഞങ്ങളുടെ എല്ലാ പേരിലുള്ള നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. പിന്നെ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു പരിപാടി നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഒരുക്കി തന്ന ജ്യോതി മാമിനും ഫാക്കൽറ്റി കോർഡിനേറ്റർ നന്ദി സാറിനും ഈ പരിപാടിയിൽ പങ്കെടുത്ത എല്ലാവർക്കും എന്റെ പേരിലും ക്ലാസിന്റെ പേരിലുള്ള നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുന്നു.
Thank you so much. All the best. Bye.
Thank you, Lekha.
Umachichi, thank you so much. And Bhavna, Ansi, Shama, thank you so much up here. Okay, bye. I am seeing their messages. Chechi, Devika, Majita, Anjali, thank you. Bye. Yeah, messages are flowing. Bye. Good night. Yeah.
I am sending you feedback.
Thank you so much. Bye. Ria, bye.
Of the department, Dr. Maharajas ma'am, Dr. Nandu sir, and our distinguished guest, Dr. Lekha Chakraborty, respected faculty members and dear students. It's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the 98th session of the Econwings lecture series. Today's session is particularly significant as we delve into a topic that directly impacts our economy and daily lives beyond the budget speech, analyzing the fiscal math. As we know, the union budget of this year was presented on February 1st, outlining the government's financial roadmap, priorities, and strategies. But beyond the numbers and announcement lies a deeper fiscal structure that determines how policies are funded, deficit managed, and economic growth sustained. A comprehensive understanding of these intricate fiscal dynamics is crucial for students, policymakers, and economists. To guide us through this complex subject, we are honored to have with us Dr. Lekha Chakraborty, a highly esteemed economist and professor at the National Institute of Public Finance Policy. She is also an elected member of the governing board of the International Institute of Public Finance, a premier global network of public finance economists. Dr. Chakraborty has been a pioneer in institutionalizing gender budgeting in India and has worked extensively with organizations like IMF, World Bank, UNDP, UN Women, and the Commonwealth Secretariat. With experience spanning multiple countries, including Sweden, Canada, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, her insights into macro fiscal policies are invaluable. Beyond her policy contributions, she is an acclaimed academic, having delivered lectures at prestigious institutions such as the London School of Economics, American University, and more importantly, she's an alumna of Government College for Women, making her success a proud moment for all of us. Today's session promises to give us a deeper understanding of the fiscal realities beyond the budget speech, helping us critically analyze government spending, taxation, and fiscal policies. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Chakraborty to this session. I would also like to extend a special welcome to our dedicated head of the department, Dr. Maharajas, who has always been the cornerstone of our department for organizing this enlightening section. I also welcome Dr. Nandu sir for the section and also other faculty members who have joined us for this session. Last but not least, I welcome each and every one of you to join this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. So now I invite the head of our department, Dr. Uma ma'am, for a few words.
Respected Professor Lekha Chakraborty and all the distinguished participants, dear students. First of all, hearty welcome to all of you to this 98th session of Econwings webinar series. Of course, with two more, we'll strike 100. And usually we get at least a week to prepare for a session, but this 98th session is a very pleasant short out of a usual conversation with dear Professor Lekha Chakraborty. Professor Lekha, who is, as all of you know, she is respected and loved by all in our department and college. And Dr. Lekha is not an Econwings discovery as far as our department is concerned, because even before the launching of Econwings, we were fortunate to have sessions led by Professor Lekha. And also, no budget season is, complete without her presence, as Anna said, and either online or offline. And all these sessions are marked by very brilliant analysis, deep insights, and thought-provoking inputs. Yesterday, when I informed her about the upcoming budget discussion in our department, wholly managed by our students, Professor Lekha said she would interact with them, and we were sure it would help all the students in understanding the budget. Of course, as the title itself suggests, to go beyond the budget speech for analyzing the fiscal math. And the primary objective of this particular session is to connect us with the right analytical routes to budget, union budget, the 2025-26. As you know, it has a transformative vision, but it has sparked certain debates also. So I'm very happy to host this session, and I apologize for the delay also. Hearty welcome to you, Professor Lekha Chakraborty, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Umachechi. So again, homecoming, and congratulations to you and students for making it to 98th session of Econwings. I'm so happy about it because I still remember the baby steps the students have taken to form the Econwings at the department. I'm so happy about it. And I'm equally happy about the upcoming student series about the union budget on 19th and 20th. And, ma'am has already spoken to me that you started preparing. The students have started preparing for the union budget series, and all the best for the preparations, and I hope to join you on 19th and 20th. But there will be a time zone difference because I told her that I will be going to Istanbul for the UN Women meeting on 17th, and 19th is my return flight. So let's see, and I hope to join for your presentations. But before that, as a prelude, I will help you to look at the budget numbers. That's what Professor has told me, that beyond the budget speech, a talk to help the students to gain a budget literacy and to look into the numbers. So this is what Uma ma'am has told me, and I'm so happy to see Professor Nandu today present in the meeting, and welcome to you. And I know your serious works, and Uma ma'am have spoken to me about you, and I'm so happy that you are present among the students. You are there for my session. Now let's
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nandu. So lovely to see you. Thank you so much. And as Uma ma'am spoken to me, let me open the budget and look at the budget arithmetic. Now that rhetorics and the political economy debates, everything about the budget is over. Now this is the time to get into the hard numbers and how to look into the analysis, analytically look into the numbers. That's what we are going to do now. And every year, Economic and Political Weekly publishes a budget special edition. And last few years, former director of NIPFP, Professor Lekha Chakraborty was the guest editor for that series, and that contains a very enriching set of articles about the union budget. So this time also, we at NIPFP and of course the academic world, we are looking forward to that particular edition of Economic and Political Weekly to get a flair of the serious analytical pieces on budget. And now I think they are commissioning the papers, identifying the right expert to look into the taxation side, expenditure side, deficit, climate, and of course, the other concerns about boosting consumer demand. So they are now trying to identify and to commission that serious set of articles. So I urge the students to take a look into that set of articles. It's a brilliant set of articles, and that edition of EPW you can buy from the Modern Book Center, and it's a valuable edition for you as it's a keepsake. You can keep that work with you to understand the nuanced public finance articles and the analysis. Now let's begin from the overall framework and the announcement of the budget. It looks like two things finance minister tried to handle. One is beyond the purview of the finance minister, that is the global headwinds. We have seen the Trump is back, its impact on the wars, the trade tariff wars we have seen, and now the Western world, they are into geopolitical uncertainties and lot of crisis and uncertainties happening around the world. So that is the setting number one. The second is internally, in the post-pandemic period, of course, base effect is there, but still, India is pitched as the fastest growing country in the world. If you look into the growth rate, of course, the base effect we cannot deny, but suddenly, when the advance estimates came last month, we were disappointed that our growth numbers were not okay. It is around 6.5, but we thought that India will be consistently growing around 7 to 8%, and towards 2047, we have a dream. We have a graduation dream to attain the developed country status, Vikasit Bharat. So this is the internal and external vision, scope, and challenge. Against this backdrop, many newspaper journalists, the top journalists, they predicted that it could be a 1991 moment. 1991, you remember, right? In